Hey guys, good morning and welcome to another episode of Behind the Closed Door. And today it's time for the workshop Creativity and Styling with, of course, our model and stylist Nadine. And those are always the cool workshops because you never know what's going to happen. So join us for today's episode of Behind the Closed Doors. If you like what we do, like, subscribe, but most of all tell other people about the channel so we can grow. Let's go! And just before the end of the year we got new banners, and if you look closely you can see that there are little holes in there. So these should be a little bit more resistant to the wind we have over here. So hopefully these survive a little bit longer. Okay, let's go in. Chewy is already waiting. And then the workshop. It's gonna be fun.
Sit. And high five. High five.
Okay, set number 1, Nadine styling. We have a click prop backdrops. I'm using one light, a strip light with the Light Tools grid on our model Nadine. And I'm using one strobe which she actually holds in her hand to shine towards the photographer. That way you get a nice lens flare, and when you angle it a little bit away, that lens flare gets less. So you can literally just play with the amount of lens flare that you want. Now, one thing, a lot of people ask me about grids. And there's one thing that I really have to discuss with you guys. Grids are incredibly important. What a grid does, or honeycomb grids depending on how you call it, a grid actually makes sure that the light is steered towards your subject. Now, when you don't use a grid, the light can actually have a little bit of a wider angle. When you use a grid, the angle of light gets narrower and narrower. And that's really cool because now you can really draw the attention to your model. Now, for me, I like a very, very narrow beam of light. And that means that I need a grid that's very tight. Now, normally when you look at grids, most grids are black. Now, when you look in our studio and in our videos, you can actually see that we're using grids that are a little bit grayish. And those are Light Tools grids. Now, Light Tools grids aren't the most cheap grids. In fact, they're actually pretty expensive. But they're worth every cent for the very simple reason we have Light Tool grids here, I think, that are already 6 or 7 years old. And they still look brand new. And with us, our strobes are actually mounted like this. So I don't hang them like this to save my grids. They're like this. If it's a grid, it should survive that, right? So Light Tools grids, I highly recommend them, and then make sure you find the ones that are gray. The main advantage of the gray ones is that you don't lose the light that you normally lose with a black one, but it also gives you a nicer flow over your image. So overall, the gray grids, highly recommend them. The brand name we're using is Light Tools, and I think they're the only one that makes grids actually for every strobe on the market, and also the gray one. So check them out, I will leave the link below. Okay, set number 2. And set number 2 was the more creative set, where actually also the students themselves create the lighting setup, choose the set and do the styling, because today everything was about creativity and styling. Now for this set, they had this 50s look with bubble gum and big bubbles, so really fun. And we thought that it would be really cool to have a pink backdrop. So the pink backdrop, a very big softbox from the front, like I believe it's a 1.20 meter from Hansel. But there's one thing, and the students didn't do this. So the students shot it just with that big softbox, and that gives you a beautiful image. But you want a little bit more three-dimensionality in your shots, right? So normally you use shadows to create three-dimensionality. But what happens if you don't have shadows because you use flat lighting? In that case, what I did is I actually moved one of the strobes on top over the backdrop, aiming down with the grid, and it just gives a little bit of separation on her hair and her shoulder, but it also shows a little bit more of that bubble. So by adding that one light from the top down, you actually have a hair light, accent light, and you have a little bit more light on that bubble. So it's a very simple trick, but it works like a charm, because now you have separation between your model and your backdrop, at least a little bit more. Okay, for the third setup, a little bit more in the cosplay range, and in this case we actually used smoke, camouflage material, and an old window that we still have in our studio. This is the cool thing about this workshop. They literally use whatever we have in our studio, and over the years, of course, you collect a lot of junk, so that junk you can now use in your sets. Be a little bit creative with it. Now, as lighting setup, for this one, I really wanted the model to jump out, so I'm using a snoot on the model, and I'm using from the back a blue gelled strobe. Now the thing is that with only that light on the model's face, the gun for example, it disappeared a little bit in the darkness. Also a lot of her clothing disappeared, but at that point you already know that we're going to use smoke, and smoke is a deflector, a reflector, and it's also a mood maker. So I know that when there's smoke in the set, that we will actually get a little bit of reflection back from that smoke, and that will light up our model. And that's actually what happened during that photo shoot, and in the final results you're gonna see that everything just works nicely together. Now, metering a set like that is a little bit more difficult, because you can meter your lighting, for example your backlighting, or you can meter your main light, but it's very difficult to predict how much light is going to be reflected from the smoke, because the more smoke, the more light is reflected, less smoke, less light is reflected. So it's always a little bit of a playing game of what happens. But that's also the cool thing about smoke. Every time you get different results. So let's see the final results for that one. Okay guys, that was it for today. Now during today's workshop you saw me shooting with a different setup. Now normally I'm shooting wired with Tethertools cables of course, but today I'm using another product from Tethertools, and let me just switch the camera around so you can see what we're having here. And this is actually the brand new Case Air, of Air Direct, sorry. So Tethertools already had a solution that was wireless, but that didn't work on Sony. And here you can see that we have it connected to our USB-C port. And over here we have the Air Direct, and the cool thing about the Air Direct, there we have the box, is that it supports both 2.4 GHz and 5 GHz. So it's a really fast Wi-Fi connection, but the best thing ever is it mimics a USB connection. So when you're shooting with Capture One or Lightroom or whatever smart shooter, whatever software you have, if your camera is able to tether with USB, use an Air Direct and you can use exactly the same techniques. So there's a little software package that runs in the background, sorry. You connect your camera via Wi-Fi, but the software thinks that you're shooting tethered with a USB cable. So that's awesome. Now, of course, the first question is, Frank, do you still shoot RAW when you shoot wireless? No, of course not. RAW files are 60 megabytes. They're really big. And even with a system this fast, you just have a little bit more time that the raw files take to come into the computer. That's about 7 seconds, which in a normal setup, when you do still lifes, that's great. But when you do fashion stuff and it's a little bit faster, that's a little bit too slow. So what I do is the raw files stay on the card and the JPEGs are transmitted over the air through the computer. And the cool thing is, it's almost as fast as with a wire, because during the wire, of course, you shoot RAWs, and then through the air you shoot JPEGs. It's not the perfect solution, of course, for the very simple reason now I have to empty my card and get the raw files in, and it's better if you can directly work on your raw files. But this is awesome because we don't have any wires anymore. The connection is seamless. The computer still thinks I'm shooting with USB, so everything works as I normally use it. And the cool thing is, if you have a Canon or Nikon, and hopefully soon also Sony, you can also use it on an iPad or an iPhone. Or, of course, Android. Now, a lot of people will ask me like, hey Frank, but... And there's always a but, right? So how does it work with the battery? That's the cool thing. Let me switch over again here. And we're going to do a proper review very soon. But you can see that there's a battery on top. And that battery you can just switch over during shooting. So you don't have any downtime. And you can just replace the battery. And in a week, I believe it's a Canon battery, right?
Yeah. It's a regular Canon battery.
So it's a regular Canon battery. And if you have a Canon, that's awesome. If you don't have a Canon, there are many, many third-party solutions like a Lupo. Or UPO, I think it is. And you can just use those Canon stuff. And we also have a little charger. It comes
with the charger.
It comes with the charger.
And there's also a lot of cables.
And a lot of cables.
For different brands.
For different brands.
Optional, there's a phase 1 cable pack.
Okay.
And we use
Let me switch over to Anouk. Yes.
We use the Arca Direct clamp. So we put the air direct on the tether block.
Yeah, so we have the tether block here. Here we have the connector, and now we have like a cold shoe, of course, for the air direct, because it's very important. Because on top, of course, I have my Hansel trigger. So really handy. The only thing I have to learn myself is don't put my camera down like this anymore, but put it on the side. But hey, this is way, way better than just shooting with a cable. And the transfers were absolutely flawless. Now, the question that some people will ask me, like, hey Frank, but in the Sony or in my Canon or Nikon, there's already software available that gives me a transfer that's wireless, right? Yeah, correct. But do realize that all your antennas, which are very, very important for your Wi-Fi speed and connection, are inside a metal housing in your camera. And that really takes away a lot of the power. And we experienced ourselves with the Sony software. The Sony software is really, really good, but there were a lot of situations where it just didn't work the way that it's supposed to be. Like 20 seconds for a transfer, which normally is like seconds. Or it just didn't connect at all. And that's because sometimes there's a lot of Wi-Fi traffic and there's a lot of interference, and at that point an internal system doesn't work that well. This system uses external setup, so external antennas. They're really, really powerful. So a system like this will give you years and years of awesome tethering over the air. But again, soon we're going to do a review on it in video and written, so watch out for that. But first I have to make sure that I know the system a little bit better than now, because this is day one and I don't want to do a review on day one because sometimes you forget stuff, and I want you guys to have a proper review. Okay, so that was it. If you like what we do, subscribe to our channel, leave comments below, smash that like button because we really like that, but most of all, tell other people about our channel so we can grow. If you like this stuff for educational purposes, check the link below for our instructional videos. They go way more in depth. They're like an hour and a half of information, and you're gonna love that stuff, trust me. So link below, and if you want to support our work, also join our Patreon. I also leave the link below. With Patreon, start at $1 a month. You get a lot of information. Like today, we shot a lot of 360 images that's going to be on there, so you can see the whole lighting setup. And every month, we're going to do portfolio reviews, including retouching videos on those images. So really cool. Starts at $1 a month. Link below. Thank you so very much, guys, and see you again next time. Bye-bye.